It should have also said this meeting is being recorded and should have come up with a little black box.
And I said okay to it.
Then it's recording. I am all
Did,
yours, my love. Yay! And then I'll send this to you once it completes as either an MP4 or on YouTube, whatever you want. All right.
oh my gosh. My
I do
question,
this every day, so I know how to do the ins and outs of this. I learned out a long time ago the hard way.
did I say it was okay?
You're fine.
Okay, so it's recording.
Hmm.
All right. Um, are you familiar with a term called chime?
Yes and no. It depends on what you mean by that. There's an agency called Chime.
What is the agency for?
It is for children that are developmentally challenged that they require services. I actually used to work for them. They're service providers. Um, they are, oh, let's see here. They do early childhood intervention. They do one-to-one. They do healthcare. They do all kinds of stuff.
So are they intervene do they intervene with the school?
Sometimes it depends on where they're located.
Um, because the only thing that it said in the book was that chime is character, commitment, competence, academic success, artistic superiority, athletic championships. So I was a little bit confused about it. Wait, what did you say again? It was. It did sound like uh, they
I'm
work
gonna I'm
with.
gonna put the link in the box. I used to work for them. We called them Family Child Resources, and then they were bought by Chime.
Oh,
Here you
okay.
go.
All right. Um,
Courage and happiness, integrity, mindfulness, empathy, services.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, okay. That's great. Thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome.
how about when a child is mainstreamed? Is there an aide that's next to them all the time? And when they are mainstreamed, are they separate from the classmates? Are they like separate or are they right beside the other classmates as if they are a classmate?
Okay, the new word for mainstream is inclusion. We don't
Okay.
use mainstream anymore. Um, and the aid can be, that goes back with that LRE that we talked about before. If a least restrictive environment for a child means that they need to have an aide with them 24/7 to be safe, then they will make those accommodations to have an aide with them 24/7, but not necessarily all the time if they are itinerant. Itinerant means that they get the services as provided as needed, um, but not all the time. It really depends on the child's disability and or um, diagnosis or needs of what happens if there's an aid or what ends up happening to them. The whole point of a paraeducator and a special education teacher that is not an inclusive classroom within a general education classroom is strictly a supportive role. They are not responsible for a curriculum. That is the general education teacher's responsibility.
So they don't help educate them.
They help support them.
What
They
does that
might,
mean?
that means that they might pool small groups. They might do one-to-one. They might do whatever their intervention requires would require them to support the child within the general education classroom. It might be pull out, but most in Pennsylvania, they're moving away from pull out. So yeah. So
Okay.
remember there's tiers we talked about? The tier
Yes.
level of the disability will depend on what the child receives as far as the interventions are concerned.
Wait, tier level what?
Whatever the tier level of the child's response to instruction is. If they're level one, it's general behavior management within the classroom. They don't have any specific things that are kept up. Tier two is more focused. Tier three is the most focused for interventions.
What
So
do you mean kept up? Does that mean that they're not graded or
no, kept up means moved up the line. So if a student has tier one needs, it means they can be handled without itinerant special education. They don't have an IEP, they don't have a 504, they're non-diagnosed, they're in general population students. Tier two is they may have to have pull-out services. They might have to have one-to-one support. They may have to have more intensive interventions. And then tier three is the highest level of interventions that they can get. And I was wrong about about the 504 and the IEP. They don't have to be coincidental with each other. You can have, I talked to my special education supervisor yesterday. They can have a 504 without having an IEP, and an IEP can have a 504 with it, but the 504 is the lowest level. The IEP supersedes the 504 when it comes to accommodations.
What is the 504 again?
The 504 is for other health impairment, or I'll put it in the box for you. Other health impairment or other needs not designated by the IEP.
But you can have an IEP and not have a 504.
Correct. The IEP supersedes the 504. In
Okay.
that case, it would be part of the IEP.
Um, okay, so when a child is being included in the class, is there seating separate or are they just a regular student in the class?
It depends on their needs.
Why would they be separate?
If their behavior is too severe that they can't be around other students for safety reasons, if they have sight or vision issues where they have to be in preferential seating, if they have hearing issues where they have to be in preferential seating, if they have to be close by the teacher for behavioral support or those type of things. But for the general pop, if you walked into a classroom that is completely inclusive as it's supposed to be, you could not tell who gets special services and who do not.
Okay. Do you think that having children in an inclusive environment helps the general class, or do you think that it might hinder it, or do you think that it might help it because do you think maybe some kids that aren't aware that they or maybe like they might actually need special services and they identify with those that have special services, do you think that because of their being able to identify with them, do you think that it helps those with special services grow more because they feel more understood and normal? So,
There's two school of thoughts with that. The first is exacerbation of symptoms by putting children together that are behavioral and or other challenges. And then there's the other one that says, like I just said, if you walk into a classroom, you shouldn't know who's getting special services and who's not based on the way that the class is designed. I believe 100% that all children should be educated together. I don't believe that they should be restricted. I don't believe that there should be any um, differentiation removal from the classroom. Differentiation of individualized instruction is different than pulling somebody out because they're special ed. Do I believe that kids should be educated with other kids of their own age and peer group? Absolutely. I don't think
what's
that
differentiated education?
differentiated education means that what based on the IEP or based on the student's needs that they receive specific things. Like for instance, our special ed kids get a specific guideline that they're allowed to have a certain amount of extra tries, or they're allowed to have a certain amount of percentage of work removed, or they're allowed to have a certain percentage of their work reduced. Those are actual IEP requirements that allow for our kids to have specific needs met. Differentiated instruction is just that, is that you can have a kid who is twice exceptional, which is that they are autistic, but they're also um, extremely gifted, or you can have somebody who has a medical impairment that is also specially gifted. Twice exceptional means that the students are gifted in some capacity. Those students would be getting different accommodations versus a student who is low functioning or has a what we call an intellectual disability. But those two kids would still be in the same classroom together unless it was not feasible for them to be there. So if a student with an intellectual disability is able to do the work of their grade level peers, there's no reason they can't be in the same classroom as them. It's just that their work is modified to meet their needs.
Okay, so can you can have kids that are gifted and are doing above what they can do, but they have autism, which means
Correct?
which means that they might be all of a sudden aggressive.
Not necessarily. Autism doesn't always show as aggression, but there may be a cognitive deficit that exists. Even though a student is listed as being gifted, it's in a specific area. They may be completely over the charts in English, but they may have a specified math disability that makes their functioning and processing more challenging. So, a lot of times with autistic kiddos, it's a mixed bag because you can have a kid who's extremely gifted in mechanical engineering, but they can't sit still long enough to be able to get through a 3 minute story. So it's kind of an interesting situation. Like, there's a lot of kids out there that do not make it in general education public school because of the way that it's designed. They need to have specialized programs, but again, that's up to the individual needs of the kid. So if I have a student who is spatially gifted, they're really good working with their hands, they're really good at making mental pictures in their mind, but they can't add two plus two, they will fall under what's called twice exceptional. They would be gifted, but they would have a challenge with a math disability or dyscalculia or dysgraphia. So it's always that second diagnosis is what determines where they're placed in a gifted program.
Where they're placed.
Correct.
Where are the types of places that they would be placed?
General ed pop, gifted accelerated programming, special education schools. There's the whole list of placement, whatever the child needs, depending on their needs. That's where the LRE comes in. The LRE is determined by the student's needs. It's not necessarily based
What
on, yeah,
what does LRE stand for?
least restrictive environment.
Oh, okay. So the least restrictive environment, say it again.
Least restrictive environment is based on the student needs, and it can be whatever they need to be the most successful in educational environment.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Um, do you think that uh evaluations are non-discriminatory? Do you think that race and ethnicity are correlated um as increased in the field of education? Do you think that there's more people that are typically discriminated against just in the IEPs and kind of segregated from class because of their ethnicity?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that we were talking about the other day was that the overrepresentation of people of color,
You were?
overrepresentation. I was talking about this with a colleague the other day. The overrepresentation of people of color, of people that are bilingual or ESL, they are overrepresented in special education population and there's no rhyme or reason as to why.
What's
Um,
ESL?
English is a second language, also called ELD or English Language Services or English Language Development.
Well,
Um,
I mean, I totally can get that because they're bilingual, so especially if they're younger, because they're processing in two different languages. So that would make them slower. If they're being asked to read something and then they're asked to read something in Spanish, they're processing it twice.
the
So
research,
I can get why they need extra help, but like black people in general, you feel as though black people in general are more in where are they? What are they in anyway?
well, the research actually supports you, but it doesn't. What it says is that students who are ELD or need the extra support are placed
What's ELD?
incorrectly in English language development. ELL, we used to call it ELL, ESL, the English language learners, all that stuff. We now call ELD, which is English language development.
Mhm.
They're overrepresented in special ed because you're right about the processing. They're not processing slower, they're processing differently. English is one of the hardest languages to learn. You know that. English is the hardest, one of the hardest to learn because of all of our nuances and all of our changes and all of our grammar rules and all of our spelling rules. It's hard. It's really hard to learn. So,
Huh.
because some of our kids are coming in, they're trilingual, they're quadlingual. They have all of this other language. I've seen students who have been um, they're able to read seven languages, but they struggle with English because they can't process English, and they're put into special education because they don't know where else to put them. So they're showing up as smaller processing ability when they're really light years ahead of their peers, but they're calling them slow because they're processing differently. You know as well as I do, learning a different language it's hard.
I
And
can't do it.
you can't. I learned Spanish, I learned French, and I'm learning sign language. And it's hard. It's really hard. And the older you get, the harder it is.
I think I could learn sign language.
Now to go back to what you were saying about the African Americans and the people of color. Yes, there is research out there and you can look it up yourself that supports it that says that underprivileged lower SEL social emotional socioeconomic status are overrepresented in special education. They they the reasons is
I don't
trauma,
agree. Wait, what are the reasons?
trauma,
Trauma.
trauma, because it changes the brain structure.
What does?
Trauma,
Yeah, but the black people.
yes, because you're dealing with most of the time when you go back to segregation, there's segregation as we talked about before with Plessy versus Ferguson. Remember that? Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus the Board of Education.
Keep going. I don't, what is Plessy versus Ferguson? What
That
was it?
was these they shouldn't be educated within the same, they needed to be integrated. Brown versus the Board of Ed was the other one. Um, both of those said, "Hey, wait a minute. We're not getting the right treatment. We're not getting the right thing. We're not getting the what we need. The money's not being sent where it's supposed to. Let's take everybody and bust them into the schools and do all this stuff." But even when they bust them into the schools, they still bust them into the lower performing schools. They still bust them into the schools that didn't have the teachers, didn't have the money, didn't have the things that they required. And the reason that it was so bad was intergenerational poverty exists at that level. Racism exists at that level. Redlining was a huge deal. Went back in Board of Education and Plessy versus Ferguson. There was a
Redlining?
redlining. Redlining is preventing people of color from being able to buy homes in specific districts. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I still don't agree that people that are black are more represented because I just feel as though it has to do with demographics and they're only taking information from certain demographics that will hold to say, yes, indeed, black people are more represented. Are they testing the all white areas? Like how is that?
Let me share something with you. The testing is biased as they know it to be true. But check this out.
Wait, how come I disappeared?
I just shared my screen.
Oh, cool.
Um, it says here is low income parents, African American parents, may have difficulty navigating special education rules if they disagree with school's determination. So the kid gets stuck in special education because they don't have the ability and or power to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Their learning styles may be influenced by their spiritual beliefs. So the African American communities are not being taught in a way that they understand that's been taken down to their from down generational. The other thing is also they don't consider cultural factors when you do special education assessments. Their labeling students of color are far more often labeled as intellectually disabled, learning disabled, or behavioral disorder and require placement in special education for many different reasons. And they're misidentified. The highest rate of misidentification is African American boys because of the way that they are um, socialized in an African American, black and brown families is different from white families. And it may have something to do with the fact that there's so many people in this small space, particularly in schools that are serving low income urban segregation, um, urban neighborhoods. They are often the biggest one is that they're inferior schools because of because of Plessy versus Ferguson Board of Education, Brown versus the board was supposed to remove separate but equal. They're like, okay, let's do that. But they're still using those tactics are still being used today. If you look at my school that I teach in versus York Suburban, you will see the disparity is almost glaringly in your face. I'm a white teacher teaching in a predominantly black school. If I were to go to Suburban, I'd be a white teacher teaching in a predominantly white school. Suburban has money. York City doesn't. They're overpopulated, overwhelmed, and most of the time the kids that are put into a program are because the teachers don't know how to deal with them. And they are the highest rate, are often mislabeled as intellectual disability, learning disability, or behavior disorder, and end up in special ed for reasons only because of they don't know what else to do with them. But the other piece of it from your
Wait,
perspective,
why don't they know what to do with them?
because they don't take their culture into consideration. So they just use special education as a dumping ground.
Wait,
But
what's their culture? Their culture is not like our culture. It's a culture that doesn't teach.
African Americans,
Wait, what is their culture?
they're um, community based. They are taking the framework of storytelling, of movement, of using the interconnected societal pieces. Public education, sit down, shut up, and listen. That's pretty much what we're telling kids to do. It's not geared towards allowing for hang on, I'm gonna stop recording. Um, but what I'm saying
Wait,
is
why'd
that
you start it over again?
I didn't start it over again. We have 9 minutes remaining on this meeting, and then we can open up another one. We have to. It had just had to be chunked. Um, so what I was saying is that the kids that are coming in that are special education actually requiring the needs for special education are often they need the services. But a lot of it is cultural because African American or people of color, they have a different way of interacting with each other. They use more of what they call, I'm looking for the word here to describe it, is interconnected, interdependent. And a lot of times in the African American communities, they prefer to work with others in class instead of on their own. They want to talk. It's culturally ingrained. And public education or white generated public education is all about you do your own work by yourself without talking to anybody. So it's kind of like they're it's kind of a catch 22. We want kids to be more open. We want them to talk. We want them to do their thing. But at the same time, we're telling them, sit down, shut up, and listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. So thank God there's a push away from that. But what you're going to discover for your field is that the ones that you're going to be working with, the underprivileged, the poverty stricken, they're the ones that are coming from trauma and needing the intervention services. ACEs is affecting their skills. ACEs is early childhood experience, adverse childhood early adverse childhood experiences early in life. Um, it's basically something that happens between birth through age 3 that causes them to have a lack of a lack of skill. It could be the fact that maybe mom can't be home because she's got to work 4 jobs to be able to provide for the family for a single mom. It could be they were exposed to drugs before they were born. It could be something as simple as, they don't have access to books and libraries because there's no money to do so. It could be that mom and dad are just too busy or to have too many kids to be able to take care of it. It could be generational that they are, there's an undiagnosed learning disability. But when you're dealing with your early childhood, when you're dealing with your kids, which will be the ones that will be getting the speech services, you're going to find that there's a lot of them that are underprivileged and that kind of thing. Private insurance is great, Medicaid is great, um, but the common denominator is that they're not getting the services that they require. There's just a lower rate of success when you have people of color, they're disadvantaged, and there's no rhyme or reason that absolutely points to it and says this is why. There's so many speculations, there's so many ideas out there as to why it is the way it is. Nobody can answer the question. We're just dealing with the aftermath of it. And we know for a fact that lower SES or socioeconomic status leads to higher rates of depression for parents, leads to higher rates of requirement of early intervention services. Early intervention should be required for every child. I don't care who you are. And they low maternal care, high rates of depression among parents, um, lack of education also pushes parents to not be able to provide the services that their kids require.
So we are fighting disparities.
We are fighting disparities from the beginning of time. Even though there were things that were set up to stop that from happening, they're still happening.
Okay. So do we need to start the movie again?
Nope, we got 5 minutes remaining, and then we can pop it out and put it back in again. We get 40 minutes per block, so hang tight for just a minute. I'm gonna look for something for you for just a minute.
Oh, Jesus.
Inaccessibility of parents to successfully advocate for themselves. There's so many links of here. There's also equity and idea. This will help you out too. Um, they're dealing with racial disparities, all this good funky junky stuff. So this are good for you there.
Um, do you
Hmm.
hold on? What age? Okay. What age group do you work with?
I work from middle school through high school.
And are they developmentally the same age that you're working with, or are they developmentally a lesser age?
It's a mixed bag. Some of them are, some of them aren't. I have kids. My students have to be able to handle the grade level curriculum in order to be eligible for my services. I'm a regular education teacher. I'm studying to be special ed, but I'm only certified in special education in the state of Maryland. I'm not certified in Pennsylvania, so I only can teach general ed classes here in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Um, what age?
I sent you two links that might help you explain the disproportionate identification.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, my seventh graders, let's put it this way, my seventh graders, some of them are reading on a ninth grade level, some of them are reading on a fourth grade level. My high schoolers range anywhere from I have kids who are in ninth grade who are reading on a fifth grade level up through I have 12th graders who are reading at college level and above.
does that affect when they go to take the standardized test? How does that affect you as an educator?
Standardized testing? Oh
Yeah,
boy.
if they're not reading up, if they're not doing well on their standardized test just because even their IEP might say that they can have extra time, but they're reading at such a low level that they're not able to comprehend actually what's happening.
Um, their scores are aggregated within the general scores. However, they are a separate section of the scores.
Oh, so they don't count against you as a teacher.
They don't count against me.
I gotta plug my computer in. Um, how do you monitor the IEP? Do you do that periodically? Do you check on that daily? Is there
I
some
don't
tests bigger and some tests smaller?
I don't monitor the IEPs unless we do the IEP accommodation. Those are my responsibility. So as a general educator, my job is to monitor the IEP accommodations in my classes and make sure that they are met for that. Um, we also attend the annual and the 6 month review for all of the kids that come into our program.
Have you ever heard of a program called the Principles of Partnership? It's
No.
like a it's like a it's to help parents identify their types of students with other parents that have been in their shoes so they kind of help each other.
Chimes had a program like that. I had the opportunity to teach it. We hooked up threes and fours, like parents who had 3 and 4 year olds who wanted to send their children to our program so they
Uh-huh.
could hook up with each other. Yeah, we did do that. It was wasn't called partnership. It was called something else. Community. It was called community something, and they all got together and they got to meet each other and exchange phone numbers and email addresses and all that stuff. Okay, I'm gonna end this and I'm gonna come right back in. This one is going to die, so I'm gonna stop recording.
Okay.